Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at early American civilizations in our continuing story of the history of civilization. Early American migrations took place across what perhaps had been a land bridge. Of course, depending on the temperatures, I suppose it could have been iced over, but very narrow area between Asia and North America, the Bering Straits, and sometime in the past, I'm not going to hazard the dates, I've got some written here, but these aren't my dates. But people came from Asia, and they migrated down into North and eventually all the way down into South America. One of the early civilizations, the Olmecs, left large stone monuments. By 400 BC, they had gone into decline, but they would later influence cultures that would come after them. First, we want to look at Mesoamerica, Middle America, between North and South America. This Central American area is going to be the rise of several cultures. First, I want to take us to the Mayans, although I'm not necessarily going in chronological order. The Mayan civilization is to be found, the remnants throughout the Yucatan Peninsula. This was a collection of city-states, and they have left to us a number of cities and stone monuments. We can see examples of temples. Notice the ziggurat feature that is found here. Palaces adorn these various city-states, and also observatories where the Mayans give evidence of having had a 360-day calendar. What they would do is they would add 5 days to the end of that so that they had a 365-day year. I'm not sure what they did for leap years. Remember how Egypt actually ignored that. They knew it was there, but Egypt would wait every 1100 and some odd years, and then the calendar would come back into focus. I'm not sure how the Mayans did that, but they did demonstrate supposedly an ability to predict both lunar and solar eclipses. Now, not to the degree we can do it today, but they noticed that certain eclipses go by on a cycle of there's so many years, and then the cycle sort of repeats itself. And so it was through observations like that that they could predict or make some predictions of eclipses. We also have examples of ball courts. Now, I'm not sure how religious they were about their sports compared to the way we are. Let's look at one. Notice you've got the big wide open court, but over on the right-hand side, you see a little loop that is sticking out of the wall. Sort of I guess, a combination of basketball and soccer is the way this game was played. What I found particularly interesting is you can stand at the one end of the court, where this picture is taken, and somebody else can go to the other end, and you can speak in a relatively normal voice, and your voice will be thrown to the other end of the field, captured and thrown, just because of the architecture of the stone monuments. Here's the temple of Chichen Itza in the northern Yucatan Peninsula. Notice the doorway on the left. We're going to go through that in just a second. But also you've got stairs on all the sides. But see the stair on the left going all the way down to two serpents' heads. And once a year, it takes place in May, where when the sun comes up, as long as you have a sunny day, it will capture the shadow of the ridges on the edge of the pyramid, and it will look like that's a snake that's slithering down the stairs. As I said, we're going to go into the tunnel and up the stairs. You have both the outer stairwell, but this is an inner stairwell. I think nowadays it is closed off to the public, which was probably a good idea. It's rather slippery and actually rather dangerous. When you see the pictures, it doesn't look steep at all. It's very, very steep in actuality. You get up to the top of the stairway, and you see it's a temple, because this was a temple and an altar that was there. Elsewhere in Chichen Itza, they found these big, well, I'm not sure if they were sinkholes or artificially dug, but Scholars noticed that there were bones at the bottom, and they theorized that maybe what was happening here was human sacrifice. We do know that the Mayans and the Aztecs practiced human sacrifice, and they thought, well, maybe they're throwing somebody into the well. Then they, from what I understand, they've since then had people with scuba gear go in and look at the bones, and they noticed there were a lot of children there. But then they counted how many bones there were. And this is probably not as a result of people being sacrificed and thrown in, but now the thinking is perhaps that this was just kids that were playing too close to the edge, and every once in a while one would fall in and drown. And so, yes, the Mayans did practice human sacrifice, but probably not in this location. Now, the cities were abandoned, the Mayan cities, around 900 AD. That didn't mean the people all disappeared. There's still Mayans in Mexico today. They had a resurgence in the early 1400s, followed by a second decline. By the time the Europeans got there, the cities had gone again into decline. The Mayan people, as I said, are still in Mexico today. They tend to be rather short. Now, depending on what they eat, I suppose you might see taller Mayans. But one of the things that we noticed was how short many of the Mayans were. My wife Paula isn't all that tall herself, and she was about as tall as many of the Mayan men. Again, the Aztecs, and here we come to the capital city of Tenochtitlan, and excuse my pronunciation, this is not my area of study, but the city is built on an island, and it became where Mexico City is today. Although modern Mexico City is much larger than the original city there. They would have island farms, and they had built these up artificially in order to grow crops. Of course, because it's on a lake, you've got water year-round, and that's a good thing. For their religion, they were polytheistic, and they built the same sort of ziggurats that we saw in the Mayans, only among the Aztecs they're going to be quite a bit bigger. Again, human sacrifice was portrayed, and here we see it in this picture also being portrayed. Here we have the Pyramid of the Sun. Nearby is the pyramid to the Moon, very awesome, very large, although when we compare that to Egypt, remember that the Great Pyramid is 2 or 3 times the height, and so quite a bit bigger. But still, nevertheless, these were awesome monuments. Now, when the Europeans first came to Mexico, this is following Columbus. We have Hernan Cortez, who made his expedition in 1518 into Mexico. And early on, he had as his guide a captive, an Aztec captive by the name of Marina, who had learned, of course, she spoke the Aztec language, but she also had learned Spanish, and so she could be his interpreter, and he was able to communicate as a result. The story goes that as he landed in Mexico, determined to go in and conquer, because this is going to be the age of the conquistadors, he burned his ships on the beach so that his men would not be tempted to, in the face of hardship, turn around and go back. It was going to be, we are going to win or we are going to die. Initially, he made an alliance with some of the natives there on the coast who were interested in aligning themselves with him against the Aztecs. And he advanced to the Aztec capital the following year, managing to bully and fight and coerce his way in. It just so happened at that time that their calendar had a sort of a 52-year cycle. It reminds me a little bit, how the Jewish calendar had every 49 years, then you'd have the year of Jubilee. Well, they had something similar here, but it wasn't a time of celebration. It was a time, a solemn observance, of warning, and their superstition said something notable or perhaps even bad could happen this time of the year. And he showed up right at that time. Now, that wasn't by his design, just happenstance, but he showed up, and so they were reluctant to take any action immediately against him. Now, Cortez found himself dealing with Montezuma. Montezuma was the name of the king of the Aztecs, and he allowed Cortez to stay in the palace. And at first, everything was good and peaceful, but then Cortez took Montezuma hostage, and now things went quickly downhill. He returned to the coast for reinforcements, and they eventually did arrive. He came back and to the city, to the capital city, and there found himself surrounded and grossly outnumbered. To his several hundred men, we had, thousands and thousands and thousands that were surrounding him. And yet he had some weapons that were new, for example, armor and iron and things like that that would allow him to greatly come against the Aztecs. Montezuma was killed in the fighting, and it was on the heels of this that a smallpox epidemic broke out. Now remember, we talked last time about the European exchange, where there were things that were in the Americas that were now taken to Europe, including the disease of syphilis, but other diseases as well as other items were now being brought to the Americas, like pack animals like horses and sheep and donkeys, but also smallpox, and a smallpox epidemic broke out among the Mexicans.